Alexander Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria for the featherweight championship. And I went out there on that video saying, folks, your boy is gonna get knocked the f out. I didn't say that, I'm not that disrespectful. I love MMA, it's my passion. That's what my podcast is about, MMA gambling. I just wanna be the biggest MMA personality on planet Earth. I wanna create my own lane in this shit. I've watched every single fight for 3 years. Whenever I would commentate football, I always had the UFC fight. It's bad, but I was that addicted. It's the closest thing to a street fight. It's the closest thing to an all-out brawl.
What is the best fight you've ever watched? Okay.
I'd say my favorite moment and fight.
Is his life ever going to be the same?
That probably took about 5 years off his life. I'm not joking. I'm not joking.
I don't know how to phrase this exactly, but do you get a lot of
Yeah, I mean, it's gotten to the point where I've gotten death threats. I mean, I'll probably get 1 or 2 a month.
Well, that's 1 or 2 a month more than you should be getting.
Of course. At the end of the day, you're playing with people's money.
What do you think is the best martial art to pick up for self-defense purposes? Lucas, welcome to the pod, man.
Sorry. Thank you very much, man. It's great to be here. First in-studio guest? I better be.
Second, actually.
No! Come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
Bennett did the honors.
Okay.
But,
well, it's only right. It's your boy, right?
Yeah, well, whatever. It's all good.
Yep.
We're going to do a great episode, so it'll make up for it. Yes, but sir. How's your summer going, man?
It's going great, man. Going great. Just continuing doing my podcast. Have an internship with an MMA organization, the PFL. A sales intern, which is
fire.
It's cool. It's cool. It's very, very cool. I love MMA. It's my passion. I have a whole podcast about it. So the fact that I'm like actually behind the scenes in one of the biggest organizations in the world when it comes to this sport, it's insane. Yeah, I'm in sales, but dude, I could be fucking sweeping the floors in that place and it would be interesting. So far, so great.
Very positive attitude, man. Yeah. How did you first get into MMA? I'm just curious because you're clearly so passionate about it.
Well, I never fought MMA, right? I would watch from time to time, beginning of high school, late middle school. This is around 2017, 2019. I'd tune in now and then. It was never my favorite sport, probably not even top 4, top 5. I never fought as well, never competed in MMA, boxing, maybe trained boxing a few times when I was little. Besides that, nothing. But I feel like I really became a super fan. Like, it happened like that when COVID hit. It was, I remember that UFC was the first sport to come back. Out of all the sports, UFC was first. I believe they had their first event about a month after COVID started.
Wow, and, dude, I wasn't aware of that. I mean, I'm sort of out of the UFC world in that respect, but you know, that's really interesting. Why do you think they were the first sport to come back, just out of curiosity?
Dana White. White, he just loves the challenge. He says it in his interviews all the time. I mean, you can have your positive, negative opinion on the guy, but he says it in his interviews all the time. He loves challenges, and this was probably the biggest challenge he's faced in his entire life with this company. So yeah, they have their event. I believe it was the first week of May, I want to say, so about a month and a half.
Ooh, yeah, that's right in the heat of things.
Yeah. And happened in Florida, Jacksonville, Florida. And that card, I was looking forward to that card like it was Christmas. I remember posting on my Snapchat story, I've never been more excited for a sporting event in my life. And from there on out, I probably haven't missed a card since that card. So I haven't missed a UFC card in about, what is that, four years, right? Yeah. A little over 4 years.
That's crazy, first of all. I can't believe it's been 4 years.
Yeah, insane.
Yeah. Dude, one of the things that I've noticed in terms of MMA is like a lot of my friends in like the last year or two, kids my age, have gotten into MMA, like particularly around that. I don't know if this is just my experience, like this might be completely random, but a lot of my boys who I like grew up with, you know, towards the end of high school got really into MMA. Do you think there's something about, you know, martial arts that's particularly captivating to like that age group? I don't know if you've had a different experience with it, but like, I don't know, maybe my experience is just completely arbitrary.
Are you talking about watching or
Yeah, watching. Well, a little bit of both, but particularly watching. Like, is there a reason that?
I think it's just the art of combat. It's special. It's a sport, yet it's not. Like, you have two guys. It's the closest thing to a street fight. It's the closest thing to an all-out brawl. I mean, and when it comes to doing it as well, I was scared to get hit in the face for years, dude. Scared. Never would want to get into fights. I mean, I went to boarding school for my latter part of high school. And, I'd do like the lacrosse fights with the helmets on now and then, hated it. But dude, like I actually picked up sparring and training, just not at an actual gym, but 6-7 months ago. And I know I'm not answering your question, but that shit's really addictive.
Yeah,
so
no,
whether it's
good,
watching or doing it, it's like, I don't know why. It's just addictive. That's the word.
Yeah, one of the questions that I had was, so correct me if I'm wrong, but you've watched MMA for way longer than you've actually trained it and way more consistently.
Yeah.
How does, watching it for so long allow you to pick up on the skill? Like, do you think it allows you to pick up on the skills and the nuances of it way quicker?
100%. And definitely. The idea of putting together a game plan, and another thing, like I bet on MMA as well. Like that's what my podcast is about. MMA gambling, combat sports gambling.
Yeah.
So you're always screaming at your TV when your fighter's down. Why aren't you do this? Why aren't you pumping the jab? Why aren't you doing this and that?
you develop the fighter's brain.
If I'm doing some stupid shit while I'm sparring my friend, I'll think, wow, wait, I just gotta do this when I'm yelling at the fighter across the screen. Let me just do that in my own fight. So yeah, I'd say it does. Watching, even playing the UFC video game. I used to do that so much during COVID. It's crazy that I say that, but I was watching a Joe Rogan interview with Max Holloway. I'm not sure you know who that is.
I don't.
He was the featherweight champion, one of the best featherweights, one of the best fighters of all time in the UFC. And he literally said, and I know I'm not comparing Max Holloway to myself, but he learned how to do a combo from the video game UFC.
Oh, for real?
Which is sick.
UFC.
So what did you do for striking?
You really want to know what I did?
Yeah.
The UFC game. I would use Renan Barral and Jose Aldo, and I would do stuff with them. I'd be like, oh yeah, this works in the game. So my friend at the time, Dustin Kimura, he would kind of hold mitts for me, and I'd be like, look, I tried this in the game and it was working. Let's try it. And we did it. I figured it out from freaking UFC, the regular UFC game, the first ever UFC game.
What?
Yeah, but Renan Barral.
You would watch the video game.
I would play the video game and be like, oh, look at this. I would try combination. I'd be like, oh yeah, this kind of works. So let's try it.
So
that's awesome.
You can 100% learn from watching and, crazy enough, playing the video game, I guess.
Yeah. So tell us about Counterpunch, man. What do you do? Introduce it, and yeah.
Yeah, so I have a podcast, the Counterpunch Podcast, as you just mentioned. We're biggest on Instagram. We mainly just put out short reels of our favorite UFC bets for the week, or just storylines for the fight weeks for specific fighters. As I mentioned at the top, I've been watching MMA for, about 4 years. And I always wanted to talk about it. I mean, I did a lot of sports commentating in high school. I commentated basketball, football. Obviously, you can't commentate MMA, and that was my favorite sport. I remember whenever I would commentate football, I always had the UFC fights. It's bad, but I was that addicted. I'd be watching UFC while commentating the fights. It was that bad. So as soon as I got to college,
while commentating the football.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as I got to college, I was like, man, I need to do something with MMA. I have to talk about it. I'm in love. I've watched every single fucking fight for 3 years. So go back to June 2022. So I had just graduated. I'm going to Syracuse, right? I'm accepted, all that. And they have this thing for Syracuse. It's pretty much like the Tinder for finding your roommate. So I go in this app, My College Roomie. And at first I was like, you know what, fuck it. I'm just going to pray for a good random roommate.
Yeah.
And on the last day before the deadline to find a roommate, I'm like, it's like 2 hours actually, 2 hours before the deadline was. I go through the app and I type in keywords. You can type in keywords, what your interests are to, try to find a roommate that you actually like. And I typed in MMA, UFC, and there weren't very many, but I got one like back. It was from this kid named Rohan. He ended up being my roommate. And a few weeks into school, we clicked. He was my best friend probably a few weeks after school started. And now we have a podcast together, the Counterpunch Podcast. We plateaued at around 300, 400 followers for like 6-7 months. And ever since the start of 2024, we've gone from like 1,000 to 3-4 weeks ago, we hit 10,000 followers. on Instagram.
Dude, congratulations.
Thank you
man.
very much. It's crazy to look at, but you know, I would always say I'm pushing for 10K before my birthday, which is on June 11th, and then it's crazy to see 10K, but now I just want more, and yeah, Counterpunch Pod, I love it, and I just want to be the biggest MMA personality on planet Earth. That's my goal. It may not be possible, but I'm gonna try.
What kept you going through the plateau?
The love of it. Simple as that. I love MMA so much, and I love talking. Put those two things together, boom.
Yeah.
That's all I really got to say about that. I love it so much.
Yeah. So you got the podcast. I know that some of it is, you spoke about it before, betting related. How does that kind of weave in? Is the podcast, strictly about, what are the best MMA bets? What are the best UFC bets? Or is it kind of split up, like you do some analysis of MMA, some, shorts where you're kind of promoting the bets that you think are good opportunities? Like, talk about that a little bit more.
It's about a 70-30 split. The majority of our posts about betting, but now and then we'll do storylines. I'll give an example. Last week, the UFC card, UFC Denver, it like broke a record for the amount of short notice fights. They put together like 5 fights in like a week span, and then the card happened. So Rohan did a video about how it was breaking the record and actually did pretty well. I think it has like 20, 30K views on Instagram. So we'll do stuff like that from time to time, but usually we're talking about gambling. And what we've noticed is that's how you grab the attention, man. You're putting big money on these big fights. That's what the people love. They want to make money. And if you give them a good breakdown, which I do every single time, I'll credit myself for that. I've watched UFC for, as I mentioned, every single card for 4 years. I think I know what I'm talking about with these fighters. So if you give them some good insight and give them a good bet and it hits, you'll get that follow, that like. And yeah, so the majority of our content is betting, but we have, there was a point where it was 100% betting. As a matter of fact, there was actually a point where we did basketball and UFC. We both love basketball, we both love MMA. But it got to a point where it was so hard to retain both of those audiences. Like our MMA videos would pop off, and our NBA videos would just get like 900 to 1,000 views, which we were like, all right, fuck that, we're gonna stick with MMA. We did betting 100%, and then I feel like I was fine with doing betting 100%, but Rohan kept saying to me, dude, we can't just do betting, right? We can't just do betting. We gotta, expand ourselves. We gotta expand our platform. And at first I was kind of ignorant to the fact, but the more I thought about it, he was 100% right. And I feel like that's where he shines. He's so good at storytelling, and almost every storytelling video he does pops off. So I'm glad I listened to him. And yeah, that's the split we're at right now.
Got it. Yeah, you mentioned that recently it kind of took off. Like in the last couple of months, you mentioned that it went from 1K to like 10K pretty quickly. What do you think contributed to that? Like what drove that relatively fast progress in a short period of time?
Well, it's two things. One simple and one was very difficult. Obviously the grind. That's the difficult part. We grinded and grinded and grinded. 100 to 200 videos within 9-10 months, short reels, just the grind. I mean, I had to be patient for that one video to pop off, and then the simple part, that one video popped off. February 2024, Alexander Volkanovski versus Ilia Topuria for the featherweight championship. And Alexander Volkanovski is probably the biggest fan favorite on the roster going into that fight. He had about 6-7 title defenses. And I went out there on that video saying, folks, your boy is going to get knocked the fuck out. I didn't say that. I'm not that disrespectful. But I said, your boy's going to get knocked out, to keep it simple. Added a bet to that. Ilia Topuria, his opponent, by finish. That bet hit, and that video's almost at 1 million views, our biggest video to date, and we gained about 7,000 followers just off that one video.
Yeah. Do you get a lot of, I don't know how to phrase this exactly, but do you get a lot of shit? Like if you kind of post a bet that is, kind of a hot take.
We can go to our video from last week.
Yeah, what is the comment section looking like?
We're going to go there right now. Sorry if you hear any noise out of my phone. Let me turn it down.
No, don't worry.
We're going to go to the comment section on my last video. This is a video that had 30,000 views, so not even our most popular video. And we can, I am selling this house to put money on a parlay in a prop bet for UFC Denver. We go to the comments. I'm going to be 100% transparent. Last week, UFC Denver, one of
You,
the worst.
you're selling your house.
One of the worst betting cards I've ever had in my life. I shat the bed at UFC Denver. Lost a lot of money, right? And lost my betting group a lot of money. And we can just read some of the comments. No post since. Anybody check up on him? Rip, shit makes no sense at all. Bro throwing darts at a wall. Delete your account. Go to the hidden comments. You're going to be homeless. Bro, you never hit any of your gay-ass parlays you cook up. You're not as good as you think. Damn, son, you lost that. House shit is sad. And that is probably the best of it. That's like, it's been much, much worse. I mean, we could sit here all day and go through this shit. But, yeah, I mean, it's gotten to the point where I've gotten death threats, whether it's in the comments or on the DMs. And at first, I'd say the first couple of,
Death threats.
Kill yourself,
That's
it affected
crazy.
me, but then you realize, right? At the end of the day, you're playing with people's money. There are some crazy people on this earth, and it's gonna fucking set them off. At this point, dude, it happens so much. There's so much hate when a bet doesn't hit, or just when people see my face, I guess, that, dude, I'm used to it. I could give a fuck about the comments. If they're commenting on my page, whether they're saying kill yourself or shout out to you, just made me a bag, it's fucking, they're making my views go up. So I won't say I love the hate, but I don't mind it.
Dude, how is that possible, man? You're just staring down these death threats like, I don't give a fuck.
Well, I'm not going to sit here and say it happens all the time. I mean, I'll probably get 1 or 2 a month.
Well, that's more than most people. That's 1 or 2 a month more than you should be getting.
Of course. There is a lot of hate at the end of the day. Probably every week, every video, there will be a hate comment. But I don't, like, at the end of the day, I've just thought to myself, and at first, as I mentioned, at first it did kind of affect me. Like, it hurt to see people, like, saying kill yourself, right? It sucked. But then I said to Rohan, and I'm like, Rohan, this guy just said this about my shitty bet, like, trying to smile and laugh it off. And he just said, I don't give a fuck about the comments. And I remember that when he said that, and he's said it multiple times. And since one of those times, I've just been like, you know what? Yeah, fuck it. They're giving us interactions. I don't care. They're gonna make my views go up, whether they follow or not. My views are going up. People know who I am now. Now, when the bet hits, it's really gonna pop off.
So over time, you sort of reframed it as like, this is attention, this is business, basically.
Spot on.
Hell yeah. So I want to transition a little bit. I want to hear your thoughts on like, what do you think makes a great sports broadcaster? It's not directly related to your business, but I want to hear your thoughts on this because you're in the game. You've studied it at school a little bit. I'm sure you've thought about this a little bit. What do you think makes a great sports
sports broadcaster?
Yeah, like or a commentator, like outside from sort of
That's a good
just a
question.
knowledge of like the ins and outs of the sport.
2 things, I'd say. 2 things. 1, you gotta just be exciting. You have to be exciting. You can't be dull. You need to have a lot of fucking passion. And 2, you need to really, really, really know the sport. I'll give you an example. I watch a lot of MMA, and I'm going to call out the own company that I work for. I really couldn't care less. I like to be real. PFL. They have some of the worst play-by-play commentators I've ever seen in my life. I mean, the guys are great. They know what they're talking about, right? They have former fighters on there as well. They're trying to do what UFC's doing, except it sounds like they're all on drugs. A fighter could get knocked down, and they'll be like, oh, he's down. Now he's back up. Sometimes they won't even mention when a fighter gets knocked down 2 or 3 times. It sucks because I feel like that's what, and I'm sorry, I'm getting completely off topic again, but I kind of have to rant.
No, this is on topic.
They could be so much bigger if they just fix the little things like that. And it's just like, all you need is those two things. You need to know the sport. You got to know everything about the sport. And you got to be exciting. And if you have a good combination of those two, you're going to be a great commentator. And yeah, it just sucks. Like, I remember I called my dad after watching the last PFL event, just went on a 30-minute rant, pretty much a big version of what I did just there. And it's just like, they are holding themselves back so much. Just fix this commentary team. Get people that not only know the sport like these guys do, but are actually exciting and can recognize when a big moment happens. It's just like, it makes me want to go to fucking sleep when I watch that shit.
Yeah, it's clearly a skill though, because I have no doubt that those guys, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I have no doubt that those guys are passionate about the sport.
100%. 100%.
So it's a skill then. It has to be like, you recognize when the big moment
Another
happens.
thing, you have to have
Yeah.
some natural talent. This is one of those things where you can't just like train yourself from the ground up. You have to be a talker.
Do you
like
think
I said myself.
Do you think you were naturally gifted? Because scrolling through your reels and your shorts, I mean, you do a great job of like building up the bro, I don't even watch UFC, and I was getting hyped to like watch these fights when I was scrolling through your videos. Like, talk about that. Like, how did you kind of cultivate that skill, or did it sort of come naturally, or are you just like fucking super passionate about this shit? And you just get people excited when they watch it.
I think it's, again, a healthy combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, so as I mentioned, I went to a boarding school. I started commentating sports my junior year of high school. I probably would have never commentated, probably would have never even started this podcast if the guy who didn't run the broadcast at my boarding school wasn't my advisor and giving me that slot my junior year. My sophomore year, I used to watch the students who were seniors at the time broadcasting in the booth, and I was like, man, I want to do that so fucking badly. And junior year, when I got the chance, it's crazy because I was able to refine my voice over those 2 years, but I was still like, not to give myself a boost, but like I was still really good even on the first game. So I feel like it is a combination of natural talent, but at the same time, I've worked really, really hard. I didn't sound the same as I do in my podcast 2 years ago.
Yeah, how did you refine your voice, man? I'm just curious. I mean,
Reps.
well, first of all, as a fellow podcast host, but also, I mean, just talking to you now, it's clear that like you know how to speak in an exciting way. Like, how did you build
dude.
that?
Reps, just doing it again. I commentated probably over 200 games in my high school, whether it was basketball, football, baseball. Reps, just doing it and try to keep the audience exciting. Also, the pressure. I went to a boarding school in which sports were massive. Sorry about that.
No, don't worry about it.
And there was pressure, man. You gotta be on your shit. And being on my shit for over 200 times in front of a live audience on the broadcast, whether it was 10 people or 200, it was, I had to stay locked in. And doing that so many times, I feel like it really helped.
Was there ever a time where you didn't perform that you can think of?
I definitely, I can't give you one example, but I've definitely shat the bed or just like blanked in my mind and didn't say words for 30 seconds. But then at the time I was 16, 17 when that happened. So it's whatever. I don't look back on it and I'm like, fuck, dude, I really fucked up that one time junior year when I was commentating baseball and just sat there and watched a home run go by like the PFL broadcasters do. Here's the difference. They're 50, I'm 16. Now I wouldn't do that, I'll tell you that.
Fair enough. Do you have any role models in the sort of sports broadcasting and media world? I mean, I was curious to hear. I listen to a lot of Rogan. My interests are sort of aligned with his. What are your thoughts on him, Dana White? Talk about these guys.
I'm gonna be 100% honest, man. Obviously there are some people I'd say I look up to, but I've never really, and it comes with everything in my life, I've never really had a role model. Like, I really just do what I want to do. I don't really like, it's crazy.
You're
because
a
like
beast, man.
It's crazy that it's coming out of my mouth, but I really don't have like a role model. Obviously the UFC play-by-play commentator, John Anik, I feel like he's the definition of perfection, or almost, they're close to perfect when it comes to the MMA sports broadcasting world. But I wouldn't say I'd be lying if I said I look up to him. I want to create my own lane in this shit, dude. Like, I don't want to be a broadcaster. I want to make content. Maybe dabble in the broadcast scene, but I also want to go to fights. I don't know, dude. I just want to make my own lane. I just want to be big in this industry. I wouldn't say I want to be a role model. I wouldn't say I have a role model. I'm just creating my own lane, per se.
Yeah. Talk about that a little bit more. Like, what are your goals with this? Like, do you have kind of a North Star that you're sort of seeking out as you build this pod, or are you kind of just doing it, you're enjoying it, and you're seeing where it takes you?
I'm kind of just going with the flow. I just want to get bigger and bigger right now. I don't know where opportunities will go. I really don't. Yeah, I honestly have no idea. Right now, all I'm focused on is the present and how much I can grow this shit. We can talk about that when college is over. I'm heading my junior year. Once I graduate, then we can really start to talk about what opportunities are next. But I feel like we'll be pretty damn big by then. 10,000 right now. I feel like in 2 years, the goal is at anywhere between 80 to 100,000 bare minimum. That's the goal.
What is the best fight you've ever watched? Is there like a fight that you have that's like, wow, that's got to be like my favorite fight?
Favorite fight?
You can give me like a couple. I know it's a tough to narrow down, but
Well, I'll give you like a favorite fight and a favorite moment.
Okay.
I'd say my favorite moment and fight was the Joaquin Buckley spinning back kick. I think it's the greatest knockout in combat sports history. I don't know if you saw that, but it's
might have to pull it up, dude.
pull it up. Look up Joaquin Buckley. I remember like Kanye reposted
Well,
it.
we'll throw it on the screen.
They are so even on total strikes at the moment.
Oh, what? Yo.
Insane. And my reaction was like that times like 100.
That's crazy, bro. I might have to watch that shit one more time. Dude,
Yeah.
the way he fell.
Dong.
Yo. That is nuts, dude.
That's probably the greatest UFC moment of all time.
Is
for
that
me.
like widely considered to be the most legendary?
It's crazy because like, I
UFC
don't really
moment.
see people putting it at number one. Because I feel like the moment
Is
like,
this talked about like what was the best like kind of shot,
knockout of all time?
Best
100%.
knockout. Of all
Yeah. It's talked about all the time.
What
What's the
are
greatest
what are
knock-
like the contenders? Like what does this debate sort of consist of?
Well, first of all, let me say that I feel like if that fight was on like a main card or had belt title implications, then
Dude, that was nuts, dude. I can't even. I'm still processing
insane, right?
how ridiculous
Then,
that.
Without a doubt, it would be known as the greatest knockout of all time. Have you ever seen anything like that in your life? No. It's, in my opinion, if we're looking at just the knockout, it's the greatest knockout of all time. But I feel like people are reluctant to give it that number one slot because the implications weren't really there. It was like one of the first fights on the card. Probably like 50,000 people were watching it live compared to the millions that would be watching a title fight. I feel like that, it, without a doubt, skill-wise, best knockout of all time. Some of the contenders, Edson Barboza, one of the best kickers of all time, spinning wheel kick, that was pretty sick. I mean, it was really, pull it
I'm
up,
pulling
dude.
this one up,
But it's a great knockout, but I don't think it's better. What else? Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje. I'm not sure if you've seen that. It happened like recently, a few months ago actually. But yeah, we can watch the Barboza one.
Sort of a situation when you get to a third round in a fight that they're losing, but they're hanging in there, and it really poses the question: what do you want to do? Do you want to take a chance and risk getting knocked out? Oh my goodness! Wow!
What does that do to your brain? Like, is that guy? Is his life ever going to be the same?
That probably took about 5 years off his life. I'm not joking. I'm not joking. These fighters tend to die around 60 to 70 years old.
Oh my
It's very rare for a fighter to see over 80 years old. It's not a joke. It's real shit. But that's why I'd never actually fight.
Fair enough, man.
Yeah.
Why do you think they do it? Just out of curiosity.
The adrenaline.
They're just adrenaline, like they live for that.
It's the greatest thing of all time. The knockout. Looking for the knockout, getting that knockout.
Yeah, well, when you're knocking the other person out.
Yeah, it's the,
Not when you're the one getting knocked out.
obviously, yeah. But it's the greatest rush of all time. Obviously, I've never done it, but that's what every person that's actually been in there on planet Earth says, that's why they do it. Also, another reason could be that it was their escape in their childhood. They didn't really know what to do with their life. Their parents were fighting or whatever circumstances in their household, and they went to an MMA gym, and that kind of saved them. That's another thing I've heard. But I feel like the rush of the knockout or just the finish, it's the greatest feeling on planet Earth. And I feel like that's the main reason. But then again, the cons, the CTE, the brain injuries, fucking up your body, injuries for the rest of your life, taking years off your life. I could never do it.
Is there like a most gruesome injury you've ever seen live?
I don't know if you want to pull this.
I'm not gonna pull it. I don't think I'm
No,
gonna pull this one.
No,
up.
but if you guys want to look up Chris Weidman versus Uriah Hall, I watched it live.
All right, you know what? Fuck.
No, I'm not. I'm gonna go grab it. No, you can look at it. You could watch. I'm not watching. You enjoy. I'm gonna be on my phone over here while you look, because if I'm not on my phone, I'm gonna be tempted to look at the screen.
Yeah, that's fucking. I'm turning that one off.
And I saw that live, and my head was down.
Like you were there.
No,
Oh,
I wasn't
you
there.
saw it,
Just I was
yeah.
watching. Absolutely insane,
Dude, that's crazy.
right?
That's fucked.
Yeah, now it's really kicking in, right? My
Yeah.
head was down like this for the next 10 minutes. Like, I felt like I was going to throw up. The dude's leg,
I just can't even process.
I don't know
that.
how to explain it. I don't recommend looking it up, but if you want to, go ahead and watch. If you're a sick fuck, go out of your way and watch like Coop
Like
over
this
here.
guy, yeah. Yeah, that's damn
Insane.
crazy. So I want to talk about your like kind of sports betting strategy a little bit, actually. One of the things that I sort of wonder with like, you know, sports predictions, sports betting in general is to what extent does your intuition kind of play a role in what you predict? You know what I mean? Like, is it sort of, are you taking a strictly analytical approach where you're just sort of evaluating like, this guy's good at this guy's good at that? But is there ever a time where like you can just feel that, you know, this guy's about to knock the other guy out? You know what I'm saying?
I'm going to say this for a lot of your questions, and I've already said it, but in this industry, whether we're talking about bets, whether we're talking about commentating, reps, dude. I've watched, I'll say it again, almost every single fight over the last 4 years.
How many fights is that, do you think? Do you know? If you had to guess, how many fights have you watched?
Over 2,000? Maybe more.
Dude, that's beast.
But I love it. You're watching combat, dude. It's fucking sick. The fuck? If anything, it's not beast. I'm addicted to that shit. I gotta figure it out. Yeah, reps. But at the same time, obviously reps. I know these fighters, but at the same time, there are things that lead into it. Yeah, maybe this fighter's better at wrestling. Maybe this fighter's got the better takedown defense, and he's way better with the striking. Things like that. What else? Another thing that I like to tackle, and I'm giving you guys tips out there. If a fighter seems to be on their way out, maybe 38, 39, they're on the decline, maybe they snuck out a few split decisions, got some close victories, but if they just look like they're either plateauing or getting worse versus a guy that's in his prime and only getting better, I usually like to take that shot. Also, cardio. Cardio is probably one of the biggest things that you need to think about when you're sports betting. Last thing I'll say, this past weekend, UFC Denver, whenever you're fighting in Colorado or the Dakotas, it's at high altitude. So when you're at high altitude, it's harder to breathe. It fucks up your cardio. I'll give you an example. First fight of the night at UFC Denver. Darius Flowers versus Evan Elder. Darius Flowers, horrible cardio, right? He's known for gassing out after round one, whether it's at high altitude or not. Took this fight on a week's notice. He was one of those short notice fights that just got announced, I think 4 days before the fights happened. And now he's at high altitude. This guy goes out there after 2 minutes in the fight. He's done. Literally done. Gassed the fuck out. And I had Evan Elder in a parlay with a lot of money on it. Great decision. Right there. Cardio is a big deal when it comes to MMA betting, I'll tell you that.
Is there is it discussed like who the best sort of sports bettors are?
No.
Is that not
It's not.
like not a thing?
Not a thing.
Okay.
It's not, no. I mean, I'd like to say I'm one of the best MMA bettors out there, but
Yeah.
I don't think people are going around saying, oh, this guy's known to be the best bet. Dude, it's sports betting. Shit fucking happens.
Yeah.
If someone says they're 95 to 100% with sports betting, they're lying out of their fucking ass. That's not a thing.
Yeah, well, what is like, give me the breakdown of like what the best sort of percentages are, or like what are the best sort of numbers that you could have as like a sports bettor? Like how does the breakdown sort of look?
Well, it really depends on your betting style. I don't really think there's an answer to that question, but I'll give you an example with myself. Per week, I'll probably only win 25% of my bets. Sounds crazy, right? That I'm shooting 25% from the field every single week. Maybe 35, 40% at best. Some weeks, 5 to 10% of the bets I'm hitting. But that's because maybe I have two major bets, my two big parlays that I'm max betting, putting all my chips on the table for, and then I have a bunch of sprinkles, 20, maybe throwing a few bucks on 20 different bets. Maybe those two parlays hit, maybe two of those sprinkles hit, and the other 18 don't. You're, 4 for 22? But you're still having a positive night because your two big bets cashed and two of your sprinkles cashed out of the 18, out of the 20. That'll still make you some good money. So yeah, my percentages are pretty shit, but my money making is pretty top tier.
Does that teach you like life lessons? You know, because you're losing most of the time. What does that teach you about dealing with failure?
Well, I'm not really losing. I'm not losing money most of the times. But it's a good question, actually. Does it teach me life lessons? Yeah. Because there's been points. Yes, we do win most of the time, but there's been points in 2022, 2023 where I'm not really at the level of a sports gambler as I am right now, where I was hitting down streaks of like 3-4 events and I'm thinking, do I really know what the fuck I'm doing? And that can really go with anything in life. And sticking to it, doing your research, shit's gonna come right. So 100% to push through the tough times, I'd say. Yeah.
Who are your favorite fighters?
I like guys, I'll be honest again, I like guys like Joaquin Buckley. I like guys like Edson Barboza that are super, super exciting. I'll tune into their fights maybe more than others, but at the same time, I'm so wrapped up into this gambling shit that I can't have bias. I just can't. I can't have bias. I used to be biased to specific fighters when I first started this shit, especially when I first started the business. It's bad business. You can't have bias. And to be honest, I really don't have favorite fighters at this point. There's not one guy where I'm like, man, I love this guy. I really, 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 really want to see him win. At the end of the day, if there's a betting opportunity there, I'm taking it. And over the past year, I'd say I've completely eliminated any favorite fighters I have because I can't from my business.
Got it. So educate me on UFC a little bit. As I mentioned before, I'm not really in the UFC world. Obviously I have like nothing against it. I'm sort of we trained together a couple weeks back.
Yes, sir.
So I'm kind of getting into boxing a little bit.
Yep.
But who are kind of considered like the top dogs in the UFC world?
Well, you got to have John Jones in there. He's insane amount of title defenses. The most talented fighter of all time, I'd say. Incredible striking, incredible grappling, just amazing everywhere. And he's still in the game. He's been in the UFC, 14, 15 years, maybe even more. He's special. He's my number one and probably the number one on 99% of fight fans' list. George St. Pierre is probably number two. Very, very similar fighting style. Is very good everywhere. Also high IQ, something I didn't mention about John Jones, which he is as well. And back to Jones. Obviously, he had his problems outside of the octagon, criminal shit. Do we know, was he on steroids? We don't really know. But
how does that, real quick, like, I was just curious, how does that affect his legacy? The fact that he had, stuff going on.
I think it was a very, very minute amount.
Okay.
I don't know. I really don't. I don't really think about that kind of shit. I just think about what our eyes see.
Yeah, exactly.
What else happened.
Fair enough.
Yeah. But also Khabib, people like to disrespect Khabib because, he stepped out of the sport because his father passed away and only had, 3 title defenses. But at the same time, you can't deny the talent. The man's the greatest grappler of all time, and somebody like that should 100% be in your top 10 fighters of all time. Who else? Who else am I missing? Demetrius Johnson. Probably the most talented fighter of all time. Flyweight, 5'3", midget, but skilled everywhere. Insane. It's just the only thing holding him back from that number 1 and maybe even number 2 slot is the level of competition. He just fought absolutely nobody, and that's because the flyweight division was so new when he fought. He's still in the game though, not in the UFC, but in a different division. But I feel like those 4 probably aren't my top 4 off the top of my head. I don't really. I could sit here and give you a whole top 10 list, but those are the 4 guys that really stick out when thinking about greats. Anderson Silva as well, top 1. He either has the most title defenses of all time or he's number 2, but he's the man as well. One of the best strikers of all time.
Got it. You got any fights that you're excited about coming up?
Next weekend, we've got a bunch of good fights over in London, Manchester. Tom Aspinall, interim champ, looking for a fight with John Jones probably within the next year. He's fighting Curtis Blades. I think Aspinall wins. It's a rematch in their first fight. Another gruesome injury, which is nowhere near as gruesome as the Weidman one, but he blew his knee out in their first fight, and now they're fighting again, 2 years later, I believe? So that's a fight I'm really looking forward to. Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad, welterweight championship, 2 title fights next weekend. That's going to be sick. Also, I'm pretty sure you know Paddy Pimblett. Everybody knows Paddy Pimblett. You know Paddy Pimblett. He's fighting as well. But if there is one fight that I'm really, really looking forward to, it's got to be Israel Adesanya versus Dricus du Plessis. It's the grudge match. They had a whole thing over, is du Plessis actually African because he's white, but he's from South Africa. So Adesanya was like, you're not actually African. A whole thing. Fuck that. It's a clash of styles. Incredible striker versus another incredible striker with great grappling as well, but he's got some defense issues, cardio issues, but he's the champ at the same time. You can't deny that. I'm really, really looking forward to that fight. I'll be rooting for, I guess Izzy is up there with my favorite fighters. I guess he is. I want to see him win, man. I want to see him beat du Plessis. I'm not gonna lie. With fights that, if a fight does come up like that, like Adesanya is probably one of the very, very few fighters where I'll I'll make an exception. And for that fight, I'm probably not going to have any money on it. I'm just going to sit back and watch. Not just because I want Adesanya to win, but with fights that have the implications are out of this world, I like to sit back and watch. So a lot of these title fights, I don't really like to put money on unless I'm very confident in somebody winning.
Yeah. Extremely random question, but
Okay.
I was just kind of curious. Do you think fighters will ever kind of fake beef between each other to sort of drive up the publicity of the fight? Does that ever happen?
Probably. I mean, I'm trying to think of an example of when that's
It's just something I always, wonder when I'm keeping up with sort of mainstream events and fights in particular.
I mean, I feel like I wouldn't say they'd like DM each other saying, "Hey, let's fake this beef," because at the end of the day, it's combat. You're probably gonna find yourself mad at that person regardless. But I'd say people probably do sell it a little bit more than are just for the money.
Yeah.
Like Colby Covington, for example. Apparently, he's probably one of the nastiest. He's not like a great shit talker. He just says the most obscene shit. Like he said, Leon Edwards, his last opponent, the guy who's fighting next weekend. He said, "Oh, you're gonna meet your dad in hell, who got murdered." Just shit like that. But people are saying that outside of the octagon or outside of the UFC, whenever he's talking to the public, he's like the nicest guy ever. So I do feel like people sell it. I wouldn't say they fake beef, but they definitely sell it.
That is a disrespectful comment, man.
Yeah. Well, his excuse was Leon Edwards' dad was like a drug lord, which he was. But at the end of the day, that's somebody's father.
Pops.
Yeah.
Dude, how much are these fighters getting paid?
The pay is
Like, what are these big top fights? How much are the fighters getting paid?
the UFC pay is just so shitty. It's so bad. The top
Really?
fighters.
It's
yeah,
bad.
it's
Dude, that
horrible.
surprises me.
Horrible. Well, first of all, you're asking about the top fighters, but let me say this: the fighters at the bottom of the card, they're getting paid $10,000 to $20,000 per fight, and they're on show win. Do you know? You don't know what show win is, but the fighters that first get signed to the UFC, they're in for their first fight and they have no name. They're usually getting paid $12,000 to show, and if they win the fight, they get an additional $12,000. Obviously, there's bonuses as well. They'll give out 2 or 3 $50,000 bonuses at the end of the night, but it's rare you get that unless you have a big moment.
So, and yeah, compared to all other professional sports, basically, that's
It's insane.
terrible.
It's insane. The bigger fighters, it depends. It depends.
Why
what
is
your
that, dude?
draw
Because I feel like UFC is it just not at the level of
No,
NFL,
it's at this point,
NBA?
it's at the level. It's just, I feel like it's just greedy people at the top, reluctant to change their ways.
Really?
Yeah, I feel like it's just greediness at the top, 100%. These fighters are getting paid fucking pennies. Yeah, they can do a nice gesture from now and then. I know Dana likes to offer more bonuses sometimes. I know if he sees like a sob story on social media, he'll try to help out. But at the same time, this dude is a billionaire. Dude, you're paying some of your fighters $12,000 a fight.
Is it his? Do you think it's his responsibility to, get these guys' pay up?
Who else is it? It's him and everyone up there. It's their fault.
Is it talked about? Like, do people blame him for that?
They blame the higher ups or just the UFC brass. They don't pay their fighters well. It's as simple as that. I remember Jared Cannonier, top 5 middleweight right now. He's not the biggest draw, but he literally said, in an interview a year ago, I'm broke. He's a top 5 middleweight. Compared to other sports, this guy should be getting paid what?
Millions.
Not millions, but at least $200,000-$300,000 per fight.
Yeah.
Right? And here's the thing, where I will give UFC credit, but at the same time, I still feel like they're greedy. The difference between them and like professional team sports is these teams have these big owners behind them. The UFC is just one league, right? But at the same time, these pay-per-views are bringing in so much fucking money. We're talking about on average right now, probably around 400,000 to 500,000 pay-per-view buys per card, and those are like $80. It's a lot of fucking money, dude. I do feel like they're getting greedy. I feel like they're really greedy. I feel like they're hoeing some of these fighters. I get that you have to build your way into the organization, but at the same time, even these fighters at the top, if they don't have a name, they're kind of fucked, and they're getting brain damage for what?
Yeah. How does that compare to like other martial arts? Boxing, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, whatever else. Like in terms of the pay.
Well, boxing pay is much better. Boxing pays much better. Boxing fighters get paid more. The undercard fighters even. they'll get paid. Like the fighter probably the first fight of the night probably gets paid. Obviously, there's less amount of fights on like a boxing card because they go by promoters, so they don't have as many fighters to put per event. But the first fight on the night, each fighter will probably get paid at least 40, 50K. You got some of these fighters in the UFC getting paid 12. Big difference, man. Big difference. But boxing, yeah, they definitely get paid better. It's the best paid combat sport by a mile. But then again, you see many more boxers dying than MMA fighters, dying in the ring, having serious head trauma. So maybe that plays a part in it. I don't know. But MMA, UFC is getting so big. They need to start sharing the love. Start giving their fighters, even that aren't really bringing them anything, more money. I mean, 12,000 is abysmal. At least 25, 30K. That's just for their show. They need to get rid of that show win model that I was talking about. It should be a flat purse, win or loss. You can't have half of your fucking salary per fight based on if you win. That's insane. You need to have a flat purse. It's one of the things that pisses me off the most about MMA. You need to have a flat purse. Because another thing, these judges, they be fucking these fighters. Like a fighter could win and get completely robbed. Boom. Let's say they're getting paid. Let's say they're getting paid 50-50.
I didn't think about that.
$50,000 gone. Insane.
Yeah.
The judges can single-handedly ruin these fighters' lives. Not only get them cut if they lose another fight, but have them lose half of their fucking purse.
Yeah, just to clarify, flat purse is like you get paid. Is that you get paid the same amount regardless?
Yeah. So instead of 50-50, you just get paid 75, win or loss. As long as you show up, step into that cage.
You mentioned earlier that one of your goals is to be the biggest personality in MMA. Right now, who's up there?
It's not that big of a world yet where there's that one guy who's the big MMA personality. I feel like that's what it's lacking, which is why I want to work my ass off to try to get into that position. I don't feel like there's that one person that is MMA media. I really don't.
Do you think other sports have that? Like, I don't know, maybe Stephen A, for example.
Stephen A is up there. He does a bunch of sports, but yeah, basketball, Stephen A is up there. He's probably the guy when it comes to sports. But even these MMA reporters, like when you see like a pre-fight interview with the fighters, every Wednesday before fight week, they'll do fighter interviews. They'll sit them down, the fighter hotel or wherever they are, whichever state they're in. And they'll do an interview, and you just hear these reporters that are supposed to be under these big combat sports, websites, and they just suck. The questions they ask are horrible. Their voices are horrible. I feel like everything about the MMA media world, not only is there not that one person, but it just sucks, dude. Like, go and watch just one of these prelim fighter interviews. Even these big fighter interviews, the reporters are just dog shit in this space. Dog shit. They ask the worst questions, no energy. It's just dumb shit comes out of their mouth, and it really pisses me off. I mean, I'm kind of just talking to myself right now, but it's just like thinking about it. It's just, I want to boost the MMA media world. I don't know where exactly I want to do that, but that's my goal.
Got it. What do you think is the best martial art to pick up for self-defense purposes?
For self-defense purposes.
Have you thought about this at all?
Well, obviously I'll give you an answer. Obviously I'm not the best martial artist. I've been training like seriously, not at the gym, but just with my buddies probably the last half a year. I'd like to say I've improved, but what's the best? I'm trying to think. What's the best? Probably jiu-jitsu, honestly.
Yeah, that's the answer that I've gotten a lot.
Yeah.
Because the answer that people give is that, street fights typically go to the ground.
Yeah.
And obviously jiu-jitsu is where you can learn to defend yourself.
I'd say street fights and then
Yeah.
some boxing or kickboxing, but jiu-jitsu is probably number one. Because if you grab a hold of the person, it's game over. To somebody that's a novice, game over. Game over. I'd say jiu-jitsu probably, yeah.
Got you. I don't know if you're comfortable talking about it, but I was curious, like, what are your sort of all-time betting numbers? Like, what does it look like? Like, if I were to have taken your advice on every single bet, that the Counterpunch Pod has suggested, how much money would I have made?
I can't
theoretically?
give you a number off the top of my head. I don't have that number. I have a website where like some of our bets are tracked. Here's the thing, like I track my bets before every card. I'll put it into this website called betmma.tips, and it'll show me how I did after the card. But another portion about my betting group is that a lot of our bets I either A, place during the card, which I can't track at that point, or B, I live bet. So while the fight's going on, I'm like, okay, this fighter's gassing out, this fighter's looking worse as the rounds go on. So a lot of that isn't counted. So I really can't give you an exact number, but I'll tell you this, as I mentioned, UFC Denver this past weekend, shitty card for me. Did horrible betting wise, lost about 8 units. But the thing is, that was probably our worst card since like November or December 2023. So that just shows you. Thing about my betting group, one thing I pride myself on, we won't, now and then we'll have these massive cards where we'll gain about 8 to 10 units. It'll be crazy. But one thing I like to pride my betting group on is that it's just slow yet consistent money. Each week we profit about 2 to 3 units. It's slow, it's consistent. I think that's the best way of betting MMA. Like we were talking about earlier, I'm 25% of the field most of the time. But if one of those parlays don't hit, hopefully I have one of those Hail Marys to rely on and they'll hit. So I make a lot of safe bets. It's not a lot of crazy weeks, but it's consistent money.
Got it. Yeah. Do you ever have like low points from a psychological standpoint where you're sort of doubting, is this gonna work? Maybe you had a couple bad cards. How do you sort of push through those tough times where maybe you're on the, kind of going down with the, betting success?
Yeah, like we talked about earlier with like, has it taught you anything? Mm-hmm. Yeah, just keep going. Just keep going. I know that I watch all these fucking fights. I know that I know what I'm talking about. But at the same time, it's MMA. Random shit could happen. Fighters can step into the octagon with injuries, or you could just have a bad read. But I'd like to say that doesn't happen a lot. And if it does, let's say I lose this weekend as well. It's happened to me so many times. Another thing, I just got to change the topic real quick. Back in 2020 and 2021, before I started any of this betting group shit, my dad and I'd bet on MMA with him, and I was like, 14, 15, 16 years old. But he'd give me like a $5 to $10 max for each UFC card. $5 to $10. Nowadays I bet much more than that. But $5 to $10 each week. And for 2.5, 3 years, I was able to just get all of my shitty cards out of the way. Make all the mistakes I can, and I credit him for that, because when I did make my betting group and I was watching every single fight and I got all of my shitty cards out of the way, when it came to actually making a business out of this shit, it paid off. And I don't have a lot of those down weeks, but at the same time I know that I know what I'm talking about. So just keep going.
Got it. All right. Honestly, dude, I think that will suffice. That was a pretty solid episode, dude.
Awesome.
Great conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Counterpunch Pod. Follow
on
listen.
Instagram. Yeah.
Yes, sir. All right.
Thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Good shit.
Adios.